This is the Brattleboro Planning Commission called to order on March 1st, 2021. At least on my computer, it is 6:01 p.m. So are there, oh, somebody just came in. Are there any announcements?
Yeah, I have a couple of announcements for you from staff. We had the deadline of Friday for the Housing Action Plan proposals. We have received 3 proposals. The firms were from Camoin 310, who helped us kind of put together the scope of work. There was another proposal, was a collaborative effort from Place Sense and the Main Street Group. And then the third proposal is from the Land Use Law Center at Pace Law School and Kevin Dworka LLC. So we haven't put together the fuller steering committee, but what I'm hoping is I will be sending the proposals out to the smaller group of planning commissioners, which was Jess, Doran and Felicity, sending them out with the scoring, and maybe we can meet later this week. I'm sending out invitations to the different organizations to appoint steering committee members as well, but we would like to start reviewing the proposals quickly, interview if we need to, and get this rolling. So
Okay.
So that's the plan with the Housing Action Plan. So for those of you, I'll send them out to all of the committee members, but not everybody will be reviewing them because we need to stay under a quorum. And then another announcement that I have is that if you're interested in bike lanes, on March 30th, there's going to be a public meeting to look at the different options for bicycle lanes on Route 9, Western Ave, Main Street to exit 2. So there'll be more information coming out on that meeting, but March 30th at 6 o'clock. It's a Monday night. And that's another grant fund through VTrans that we're working on that one for. So those are the 2 announcements that I have. Also, tomorrow is town meeting, so please go out and vote. I'm not exactly sure when the polls are open, just
7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yes.
down at the Legion, the American Legion.
Okey-doke.
Hi, everyone. This is Stephen Dotson. I am under Sue Fillion's name, and I can't change myself because I'm not the host right now. So this is my Sue Fillion impersonation. I'm sorry, Gary. I see you in the chat, and I created confusion. If you could change me, Sue, thank you.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Welcome, Stephen. So are there any more announcements by anybody else? Okay. Public comments? Are there any members of the public present? All righty. Approval of the minutes of February 8th. Did everybody get a chance to look at those minutes? If so, I will accept a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the February 8th minutes.
Great. Is there a second? Great. Jess seconds them. And is there discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Are you speaking, Prudence? I can't see either your hand or your eye.
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yes. All right. So everybody approves, those not approving and those abstaining. There is one abstention. Otherwise the minutes pass. Okay. Now the downtown transportation grant. Sue, do you want to preface this discussion?
Sure. So I hope that you all had a chance to see the memo that was in the materials. The town is hoping to apply for a downtown transportation grant. This is a set of grant funds that is available for communities that have designated downtowns, of which we do. They want to, when I say they, it's the town manager's office that's really handling this. This is not a project out of the planning department. So Patrick Moreland, the assistant town manager, has kind of been working on the Amtrak project. And so he would like to use the funds to help towards the parking lot that will be built on Depot Street. The Amtrak station, as you saw in the materials, is going to replace about 10 parking spaces, or it's going to take up about 10 parking spaces down on the waterfront. And so the idea was to, what the plan is to demolish the archery building and to create a new parking lot, kind of where the existing bus turnaround is and where the archery building is. That is a brownfield site, so there's a couple of pieces going on. There's brownfields work going on. The archery building, the white building that's down there, is a contributing structure in a national register historic district. So that is going to require review by the State Historic Preservation Office and the plans for that, how to memorialize it, whether or not they're even going to allow demolition of it. That's all going to be underway or be reviewed, because there is federal funds going into this project. The brownfields funds are federal funds, and when you use federal funds, then you need to comply with the historic preservation requirements. The downtown transportation grant, I think, is due at some point next week. It does require a recommendation from the Planning Commission, as well as the Select Board. I know it's going to be on the Select Board agenda tomorrow night, but there have been discussions about the parking lot project dating back to December with the Select Board. I mean, I can open it up to questions, or I can address some of the concerns that I know that have been raised.
Tom?
Yeah, is our only option a yes or no, or can we suggest or changes? Can we suggest changes with effect?
I don't, I mean, I think for the purposes of applying for the grant, it's a yes or a no. This has not gone through site plan review, so the suggestion of changes is for sure that can still happen. It's not been approved, and it hasn't gone through, any other permitting. The Amtrak station has, but this parking lot will go before the DRB. There is an engineer that's been hired, but there's, it's conceptual at this point.
Prudence?
So I just have some concerns about why we need to expand parking there. I mean, we know that there's enough parking in downtown. We know that from the downtown study. I know there's not a lot of parking necessarily in that end, but it's not real far from the parking garage. And so I think that it's a net of 25 extra spaces. And I know I look back at the downtown design plan, whatever our current name for that is, and there were like a lot of cool ideas for that space. And I couldn't tell from the schematics, is that parking lot taking up pretty much all of the green area? And if so, it doesn't seem like the best, necessarily the best use, or at least I would want to understand more why we need that much parking added. We all, just to remind you, there was some talk about doing a WUNF, I guess it's called, that Dutch term, for Bridge Street, where we were going to be more of a pedestrian, bicycle, yes, cars, but not car dominated. Not that again has been approved, but it was an idea out there that seemed like a pretty cool idea, especially given what's going to happen with the Hinsdale Bridge.
So to address a couple of those points, so the design would go as far as the archery building, so the green space would remain untouched. So there is, where the green space is and where the seating is right now. There's a couple of large granite slabs that are down there that would remain untouched. The downtown plan did look at repurposing the archery building to some extent, but that was not necessarily, at that point, I think even the Amtrak station wasn't that far along when that came into being. So, unfortunately, that is a little bit of a mismatch there. As for the number of parking spaces, I think that when the parking study was done, it did indicate that the southern end of Main Street has some parking challenges at certain times. We are hoping that with the Amtrak station being redone, and at some point passenger rail is going to increase, and possibly there'll be some better routes coming up into Brattleboro from Massachusetts. I know that's kind of been looked at in rail plans as well. And then with the bike ped conversion of the existing bridges to bicycle and pedestrian, we're actually, there's been a lot of talk as seeing that kind of area as kind of a trails hub. So, you can get over to the trails in New Hampshire from there. Stephen and some others, ideally at some point, maybe we could get a rail with trail to connect up to the West River, so along the trail bed. So there was this feeling of, it could be an area for recreation, whether it's kayak drops on the island or, just the bicycle and pedestrian activity that could happen. So I think the idea is, well, there might be more traffic down there at some point, or there might be more of an attraction down to the waterfront. So more parking would help serve that. And then the other thing I would say is when the parking study was done, the museum's plans really weren't revealed. So, if the museum is able to have some level of redevelopment of that block, that lower block that's sits right over the bridge there, like they had unveiled, then we do expect that there's going to be some more parking needs. So
Gary, if that is actually Gary, because I don't see a face, I just see a name.
Yeah, hi, it's Gary. Yeah, I'm not looking at my best going through the medical therapy that I'm going through, so I'm gonna kind of just, bow out of that. But I guess my question is, I was listening to Prudence, I don't know, we had our meeting, and I'd like to get even feedback with Dan and Sue that they're opening up a new building down on Flat Street, and we spoke about parking. I brought that up as a issue also, and they said there's going to be plenty of parking. And I believe in that time when the spigot does open, that's going to attract more people, because I was going to ask the people on the traffic safety review to see how much flow of people coming now into Brackett. I've noticed a lot more people coming in. And once people have been inoculated, and once we've gotten that comfort zone, I guess that's going to attract more people to parking in that area. So I just wanted to throw that at Dan. Is that something that we mentioned at DRB also when the new building? Because I had mentioned parking.
There was a lot of discussion at the DRB meeting, being concerned that there was not enough parking down there. But at that point, we were encouraging you not to, focus too much on that, because we knew that this parking project, I think we had mentioned there would be a parking project coming forward.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think what they were focused on was the number of residents in the building who would be added, and that the transportation center could absorb them, essentially. So that's why they made that comment, that it wasn't a concern of theirs.
Are there other comments? Prudence?
Gary, I'm not sure which building do you mean?
It's the one next to the municipal building.
It's the 47, it's the old Sinel building, the DeWitt.
Okay.
I think it's DeWitt, 47 Flat Street. So it is right next to the transportation center.
Okay, so that wouldn't need parking down by the train station.
No.
just one other question. Will some of the parking be designated for long-term use by people who are going to New York for the weekend or going up, north or whatever?
I'm not sure that those management decisions have been made. I think that what I've heard is that they would still focus on the longer term parking, probably at the transportation center. But it would be the shorter term and, maybe several hour parking for kind of maybe more of the day trippers.
Yeah, I was going to mention they had on NPR about building, I don't know if you heard about a bullet train, but that's 30 years down the road, Sue. So I probably won't be here then to see that. So that was something they wanted to put together for the Northeast Corridor to get people to and from Boston areas and other areas and out there. But that's something that's projected down the road. So I don't foresee that in the plan of being anything. It was an inconsistency or anything like that that you guys had to worry about.
So Stephen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this is the point I wanted to bring up is just considering how multimodal transportation could be enabled by this parking. And what I know is that we've aspired to try and enable people to live in Brattleboro, but be able to commute down into Western Mass and other centers of employment that, there's train lines that have been growing north to here or to Greenfield now, and they aspire to get even further north. So that day tripper idea is worth just holding in mind that as that grows and as there's investment in transportation and infrastructure in the next few years, it could be that to have those parking spaces is to enable people to really grab some jobs and commute for an hour all the way down to Springfield or beyond, and have a family life in Brattleboro.
Tom.
Yeah, I'll just say, if this was any other parking lot, I would be very reluctant and I would veer towards no. But I did look at the parking study and I saw how this one was at, was at capacity during a couple of the days. Well, they said weekday in one of the tables, but that was actually Friday evening. So they didn't do a true weekday in that study. But Friday evening it was at capacity, and then Sunday noon and afternoon and evening was either at capacity or near it. So I am reluctant, to support more parking, even though overall we don't need it, and right at the river's edge. And in addition, it's kind of counter to the downtown design plan, but it seems like there's some good cases for it here, and the actual number of sites isn't set in stone right now. It's just because I think right now we have like 28 there, and if 10 are going to be removed, that's just down to 18. So it does seem to me like we need at least a few more. 25 more, I'm not sure, but I think that can maybe be figured out later.
So I'm going to take my chair hat off, if you will. I'm just totally opposed to this. And I'm totally opposed to it because this is the river, and we have been talking about having access to the river, and the river is an attribute of the beauty of the town. And to put a parking lot, in a place where you could potentially, if we could demolish the archery building or if we could rehabilitate it, I know that's an enormous amount of money. It could turn into a really beautiful part of town where that's a sort of art part where there's pedestrians, there's bikes, there's kids playing, running, doing all sorts of things. We're in the midst of a pandemic where public space is we really need more public space where people can safely gather. And we're about to put impervious pavers on. I'm just saying that we may put pervious pavers on, but still there'll be cars sitting on them. And it'll block the view of the river. And it just is contrary to all the best practices of the urban units of tomorrow that emphasize human beings and not automobiles. We have lots of parking. We have lots of surrounding areas. You can walk from the transportation building to the train station and walk through town and spend some money getting yourself something to eat. And I just think this is the wrong direction for the town, and I'm going to vote against it, but you all make your own decisions. So I'm putting my chair's hat back on again. Jess.
Felicity, I love that you brought up the point about our relationship with the river. I think the relationship with the river is really important. And, before you said what you said, my comment was going to be that if the design had incorporated something or had something incorporated with building that relationship or acknowledging the presence of the river and not just sort of plunking down next to it without much thought, I think that would be really exciting. I'm glad to hear that the green space that is there will remain. It's my favorite park in Brattleboro these days. It's a great place to eat takeout. So yeah, I'm not entirely opposed to it because I think it would be a great place for folks to, when the bridge is redone, come and access the river eventually. But I think that incorporating that intentionally into the design of it is so important.
Dan.
I agree completely in principle with what you're all saying. I wonder if Sue could comment on what we might expect though, because expect in the development of the site because it's a brownfield site. It of course goes without saying that right next to the river there is a brownfield site and there was some contaminating activity going on in the past, and maybe this will be an improvement no matter what it is,
Mhm.
So I wonder if Sue could just give us an idea of what we might expect because of that.
Sure. So this portion of the site has pretty much, PAHs, maybe, I'm sorry, I didn't pull the report before the meeting to prep, but it's maybe some PAH, arsenic, which is just kind of background, not from any particular, use of that property. So kind of industrial type soil, common contamination that you see in the soil there. I would expect that Vermont DEC, we're going to have to amend the corrective action plan. And right now that corrective action plan means that the archery building is there and uninhabited. And it also means that we've got the pavement. Pavement is a suitable corrective action plan for reducing any contact with the contaminants. So I think that it's not going to be an issue to pave in that area. Whether or not they're going to allow impervious, I'm not really sure. In the past, when we created that turnaround, they were also fairly resistant to any deep-rooted landscaping. So trees were a problem. I could see planters there. And I think, I think we're looking at planters or anything that's shallow rooted as any landscaping down there. I would say that area, so the area with where the green space is, that's kind of where the coal tar was. And I believe that's more the area where coal tar was found on the river's edge or in the sediment of the river. I know that the town was really hoping that when the Hinsdale Bridge project went in, we might receive land as part of that, but they did not need to take. We were hoping that Merrill Gas, if there was a need and that was taken, then it would be the town, and then there could be this grand riverfront, and reuse of the site. Because as you get further to where the new bridge will be, it gets shallower and would be easier to drop a canoe or a kayak. It's fairly steep in this area. And so it would have to be kind of a cantilever deck of some sort to kind of have a walk over the river. It probably nothing with piers because of the coal tar situation, and that would need to be investigated. So I think at this point, the hope is whatever happens on the island, and there's been some planning that the regional planning commissions, both the New Hampshire and Wyndham Regional Commission has done, that's kind of could be the area where those where that kind of kayak and canoe drop would happen.
Can I ask Sue about the history of use in that building there that they're asking for permission to demolish? Like,
Yes, so
it's empty.
it is empty. It was built, I think, it was a railroad siding building at one point. I know some people have said they thought it was one of the first train stations in town. I've not seen any documentation to that. So it definitely had cold grain storage and, things like that. And it was definitely a railroad siding building. More at some point, it became an auto garage. There was an addition that was taken down. So there was an auto garage. And most recently it was it gets the name of the archery building because it was an outdoor outfitters. And that was probably until the mid 2000s when the town took the property by eminent domain associated with the Hinsdale Bridge. Because it was thought that the entire land from the existing bridge down to where the new bridges would be part of the project. So it's been vacant since about 2006. At one point, the town did put out a request for proposals to try to lease the space and have somebody operate out of there. There was a little bit of interest, but it was really going to require the tenant to fit up the buildings, and it just wasn't going to pencil out.
So is there further discussion? Yeah, Tom.
If we're doing a yes, no, abstain vote, I would request for the no's to be asked first and then the yeses.
Okay, can we do that? Sue, are we allowed to move the voting around?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Or the motion could be a negative motion, Tom. It doesn't.
I've never seen that done, and I was thinking about human psychology and stuff. And anyway, I won't get into it.
I just want to say that if you don't vote for this, the town is not going to be able to apply. So I just want to put that out there. If you do vote for it, we could have a conversation about what you'd like to see out of it, because it is still, the drawing that we gave you is kind of the concept. It is not the engineered kind of full plan. And I do realize that this is coming to the Planning Commission kind of last minute.
Prudence, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wondered about the implications of a no vote at this point. And if I don't want to see us, miss a chance for some grant funding to help the station happen. But, as I already said, I'm really concerned about the parking plan. So I don't know whether we could construct a motion that can we construct a motion that talks about wanting more input or more understanding of how the parking would fit in with a vision for that riverfront space? And so it's not a no vote to apply for the grant, but I just feel like it didn't even get mentioned. The justification didn't really talk about that at all. There was no context for it. I mean, for the fact, if it's parking for access to the trails or kayak drop off and so on, that makes some sense that we'll need some there, but how much? And anyway, I'm rambling, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not rambling, Prudence. I think this is I think this is an important, it's important because of the context of the plan that we've just spent half a year or whatever longer working on. And it's important in the connection of our sort of future thinking. And it's important because there's $100,000 on the line. But I don't know that we have to answer not answer your question, but to say something. I don't know that we have any rights other than what we have right now. And I'm not going to say anything as chair, but I'll wait and call on myself later to say something in response to that. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Sue, I've been looking at the memo with the sketch. Uh, could you possibly share your screen and show that image, and we can sort of walk us through it a little bit?
Sure. Thanks. I know Gary was looking for a map of the area and it just was too difficult for me to do while I'm running the meeting. So let me see.
Ooh.
Sorry if I'm scrolling quickly.
What's helping me in the conversation too is I've got a Google map of the area pulled up so I can see how it might overlay.
Okay. So here's a map that Andrew put together. The pink is the downtown district. So this is actually for the grant application. And then up in the corner here, sorry.
Oh, that's helpful.
So this is the this is where the Amtrak station, approximately where the Amtrak station will be situated. And some of the existing parking will remain, but it is taking up about 10 spaces. Here is, actually, let me go to the site plan. This is something we were kind of trying to superimpose. Okay, so this you can see it a little bit better. So the existing archery building, I don't know if you can see the light gray lines under here that I, maybe I can draw. Well, right in here is where the existing building is. And this kind of blue line here is kind of where it starts to go up to the green space. So that remains untouched. So the parking lot would have some islands that could have raised beds, probably landscaping in there. Let's see. It doesn't go any, so the existing archery building is actually a little bit closer to the river. We're not anticipating that it's going to go any closer to the river. I think that these are kind of, these might not work as parking spaces because of grading. So there's a lot of grading that has to happen to kind of match with the Amtrak project and Depot Street, which is down here, and then what happens here. I think this might be a challenge because it does kind of slope up a little bit. So I would imagine that those might not make it, but this is the concept for the point. The dark gray down here, these are existing parking spaces. So these are the light gray would be the town's project.
So Sue, is that the actual water line, the wave looking lines?
No,
at the
that's the tree line.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, right.
Yeah, sorry. It's this kind of hard. The dashed line is actually the floodplain, so it's a little bit in. It's kind of the next, the line to the top of the page would be the kind of the edge of the top of bank, I think.
Right, but the flood line is the dotted lines.
Yes. Yeah. And the wavy line is kind of the vegetation line. And then there is going to be, one of the things they're going to try to do, one of the last meetings I was at, there is going to be a new stormwater structure put in that kind of filters. And so they're trying to look to see if that can also capture what comes from this parking lot and how that would work. So it's a different type structure.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The turnaround in some form needs to exist, right?
Um,
Or I think I heard that once. I don't know if it's true or not, because buses go down Depot Street, public buses, and then they need to be able to turn around.
yeah, so the turnaround was put in because it was kind of a part of the initial funding for the work down here, because it was tied to the transportation center and buses were coming down here. So the turnaround, it is designed so buses can continue to come down here.
Right.
So if there's nobody else, I'm going to call on me. So I guess one of the things that is stopping me at this, I understand the sort of urgency, but I also balk at the notion of being rushed to something that seems contrary to our long-term plans and hopes for the town. And grants come and go, as we know. You know, there's a one you can apply for the next year and the year after that and the year after that. So, and presumably there will be more money coming out of the federal government as it pulls itself together and becomes functional again. So I guess I'm still first of all, I don't want to be forced to make a decision, and in being forced to make a decision, I'm gonna make the contrary decision, which is to do nothing, because I look at this, especially looking at this plan and thinking all those spots filled with cars between us and the river, that it's contrary to my idea that somebody drives a car down here and then gets out and admires the river. I can totally see you parking your car at the transportation center and coming down and seeing this broad scope of developed area that is natural. And I think, again, going towards the future of our town, we want to embrace our river. We don't want to park at it. So that's all. Sue.
I just want to make a couple of points to that. The parking, I understand the parking at the transportation center. I mean, it's kind of what it's there for. I would question some of the accessibility for people to actually get down here. The slope of Bridge Street is actually quite steep. And so I don't know that it works for everyone. And there is some parking down here, but having additional parking does kind of help that. Our sidewalks, we know we have slopes in the downtown that are not conducive to people in wheelchairs and other modes. I think there was another thing I was going to say. The reason that the town was interested in applying for the grant this year is because the Amtrak station is going to start construction in 2022. And so the intent was to do this parking lot in 2021, because if there is not additional space, then everything that the existing parking that is there is going to be taken up with construction vehicles and staging. And so that was why this year was the year that was targeted for this grant, to try to make this in advance, so knowing that some of it will be used for staging and there will still be parking down here.
I can't see anybody. Does anybody more comments? Do we need to call the question? I don't know that we have a motion on the table for a vote. I think we need a motion if the discussion is at an end.
Could I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Sure.
So I'm sure there were alternative designs considered as far as, I don't know what the term for it is, but as far as whether it would be good to have a diagonal arrangement of cars versus straight on to the river and so forth. One thought I had about that would be the view from the New Hampshire side, where you'd be seeing headlights coming full on, so were there other considerations in that design or other alternative designs that you could give us an idea of that might pull back the frontage of it from the river?
Yeah, that's a good question. There were a couple of different designs that were looked at, I mean, sketched out. Some of them went all the way across the green space and we're like, no, 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 that is not what we want. I'm just trying to pull it up. I can tell you that this was the design that had the most amount of parking spaces. There were two we were looking at. This had about, I think, like maybe 5 extra spaces compared to the other design. Let me see if I can find them. I don't believe there were any angled parking options.
Right, my thought there is if it were considered where the headlights are pointed, if they're pointed at houses or, you know, whatnot across the river, I don't know what the angles would
Yeah,
be and whatnot.
there are no, there's no houses. It's the marina that's kind of
Right.
directly across from it in New Hampshire, and that is
There's an island.
sorry, what's that?
Yeah.
There's an island between.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
us
it's
and
quite a
the other.
distance. I know there was no consideration of the headlights, though. I'm pointing towards the river.
Sue, there's a question in the chat from Gary. Were there only 2 conceptual designs?
No, I believe there were 4 or 5.
Okay, Tom?
Yep. I don't know if it's my memory or hearing mixed things, but I guess I just want clarification. Is it is this design set in stone, or can it be drastically changed?
No, I would say it's not set in stone. It's you know, they have a contract with an engineer to work on it. I think that there can be changes to it, and it also has not gone before the DRB. So that, you know, they're an independent board.
So yes,
so
the grant application isn't going to say 36 parking spaces. It's not going to have the schematic in it.
I am not doing the grant. I'm not sure if it will have a schematic in it, but it is a schematic. I mean, it's not an approved site plan. So the grant application is going to say that site plan approval has not been granted yet. That is a permit that is needed.
Okay.
But does the DRB have any tools at its disposal to reject a plan based on its relationship with the river or our values around transportation modes?
Not around transportation modes, but with, you know, issues like buffers and stormwater and not really number of parking spaces here, but they could, I think that they could reduce the number of parking spaces. They have a say over lighting and landscaping, buffers, those kind of site plan elements, turning radiuses.
Andrew?
I guess this is more kind of for Sue, but since staff provides memos to the DRB, I was curious if possibly as an attachment with part of the materials, maybe the planning commission can submit some sort of letter or you know, suggestions possibly with that.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, the planning commission can definitely work on something when we have it warned. They can, you know, be a party and come speak to it, submit a letter. I think, I mean, perhaps some of the feedback to the assistant town manager is, you know, maybe more people need to be involved in the design of the parking lot as well as that moves forward. So.
Are we ready? So is there, we need a motion on the floor. Tom, maybe you can make an emotion that would answer
Oh, no.
your wish.
Okay. I'm not good with double negatives. I don't know how to word it. Let's see. I move to not allow the town to apply for this grant. The downtown transportation fund grant.
Okay, the motion has been moved. Is there a second? Oh, wow, if nobody seconds it, then we're gonna have to have another motion. What do we do if nobody seconds it? We can't go forward. Does somebody want to make an alternative motion?
Yeah, sure. I move that we recommend the town apply for the Downtown Transportation Fund grant for this parking lot. And if
Is
there's
there-
anything anyone wants to add to that motion.
Is there a second? Prudence, are you seconding or are you asking something?
I'm seconding it, but
Okay.
can I amend? I'd like to suggest an amendment to the motion as well. Maybe move, period after applying for the grant, and then the planning commission intends to advocate for a smaller parking lot, or, we could say other things or maybe have better language, smaller parking lot that respects the proximity to the river and other valuable uses for this property or something.
Thank you, Prudence.
Andrew, Sue, is that, can you take note of that motion? Okay. All right, so all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand so I can see it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? Any abstaining? Okey doke. The motion passes. So the next item, oh, I lost my agenda. Wait, that's not my agenda.
Want me to put it in the chat?
No, here it is. So preferred citing subcommittee update.
Okay, shall I start us off, Jessica?
Yeah.
All right, well, we had our, okay, you feel free to chime in whenever. We had our kickoff meeting last week, I think it was. The 3 of us from the Planning Commission and 2 from the Energy Committee and 1 from Conservation Commission. And a lot of the meeting was just kind of getting ourselves on the same page and defining the goal that we're doing, that we're seeking to deliver, and making sure that more or less, at least in a general sense, we were on the same page and understood what needed to be done. And then we kind of assigned, set a loose timeline for work and what we expected for our next 2 meetings, and set some homework that we would have for in between meetings to deliver for the next one and the one after. So that's a very general sense, but I'll go into a bit more detail. Our focus is, as you all know, it's pretty narrow in some sense, but there's a lot of increasingly more of these preferred sites using utilizing a town's letter of support. As Ralph specified, he's the solar expert. There's solar development happens in all sorts of ways, like utility scale and I don't know, all these other categories too. And through the letter of support, he was saying, although it's a very narrow focus of all the categories, there's a lot of it happening. So basically our goal is just to recommend to the Planning Commission and maybe the Select Board. We were kind of unclear if the Select Board might use this as well. But to recommend to the Planning Commission to a process by which to determine what is a preferred site in town. And it's really as simple as that. And we figured that we may do other sort of auxiliary things to that, like make recommendations to the town plan. Maybe we'll, in our research or interviewing people, we'll come up with other related recommendations, like changes to property tax, if possible, or other incentives. And let's see, let me check my notes here. Oh yeah, so one thing that came up that I didn't realize and couldn't find the wording for, but you know, our expert on the committee clarified, was that this does not apply to wind or biomass or hydro. So I thought wind was, that this possibly applied to wind as well. But apparently it's just solar, so that makes our job easier. And we don't have to consider, you know, very different siting could be a factor between wind and solar. So it makes our job easier there. And I did look at some list of preferred siting projects that have gone through that number 7 letter of support, and they were all solar since this came about. So it seems like even if wind is possibly in our purview, it seems like it's not something people are doing under this category. Yeah, and we made a general definite, like, kind of structure to our recommended to the deliverable that we're going to bring by August. And we decided that we would do loosely, we may change it, but we're going to go with a like a point-based criteria system in tiers. So we loosely talked about having maybe 3 categories. Well, let me back up a little bit. In between our first meeting and the next 1 or 2, so the second and third meeting, we're going to bring interviewees on, like different stakeholders. Doran is going to be the one reaching out to people by phone call and inviting them to come to our second and third meeting to give their opinion on what, as a town, we should consider in defining preferred sites. And all the rest of our homework is, there's this Google Drive folder that we've put together that has you know, related content from, whether it's from the town plan or land use regs or the Wyndham Regional plans, documents and planning at the state level. There's about 5 or 6 examples we found from other towns that have already done this process. There's some news articles online and comments. What else is there? There's some documents from the PUC, the Public Utility Commission. So we've kind of divided those up, and we're going to research and study them and take notes to jot down different potential criteria that we may consider or may not. And some of the important points, like looking at the land use regs, the town land use regs, as an example, one of the possible criteria is that maybe we want preferred siting to be outside of the water and sewer service areas, so as not to kind of dilute that investment that the town has taken. So that's like a kind of a binary criteria. And an important consideration is that it seems like the kind of the culture of Brattleboro has been one that is very supportive of solar. So that's not really a criteria. It's something it's a cultural like precedent to keep in mind. So we'll go through these documents and in interviews and kind of tally those up, make a list, and then kind of whittle them down in order to determine which criteria we should consider, which ones we value, and then give them like a ranking, a point score. And then getting back to the tier system, we thought maybe there would be 3 tiers. And if a certain amount of points, if let's say, if in the low category of points, if the qualities of a proposed solar development on a site score in the lower tier, that's a better way of saying it, then it wouldn't be considered. If it's in the higher tier, then it would be a shoo-in. And if it's in the middle tier, then there'd have to be a process of more in-depth consideration by the Planning Commission. yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now and the structure that we've put together. And we're going to have meetings monthly. That's our expectation. And start working towards the goals. So if I missed anything that you guys think you expected the subcommittee to do that it sounds like we're not doing, or anything else related, please chime in. But it seems like Jessica wants to add some things.
Yeah, there were just two additional things that we talked about. The first one was we'd like to add someone from the agricultural committee to the team because this may impact or be a business opportunity potentially for folks who own farmland. And then the other one was, I'm not sure if we had brought it up at the last planning commission meeting or not, but the idea of a moratorium on saying yes to future projects. We did talk about that in the subcommittee, and we would love to, you know, well, Tom, I'm not really sure we had any recommendation in any direction, and also suggested that maybe the planning commission not need to discuss it yet because we see so few of these, and that imposing a moratorium when there are so few proposals coming forward might send the wrong message.
So can I ask a question? Are you guys coming up with a list of criteria that would, if you were at the top or the bottom, sorry, the top or the bottom, you wouldn't come to the planning commission. You would either be a shoo-in or you would be a no-go. Or are you saying that all of these proposals would come to the commission and the commission would use this list of criteria to make its decisions?
Right. Yeah. The second case.
Okay.
But it's a tool for the planning commission to take up less meeting time.
Right. Okay.
With this future.
Are there any other questions? Sue.
So there has been select board interest in what the subcommittee is doing. And I do think that it's important that both the planning commission and the select board be on the same page with what the final criteria is, because remember, it's, you know, you need a positive from the planning commission, the select board, and the Wyndham Regional Commission. So I would just really encourage the subcommittee when the time comes is we should begin those conversations with the select board, because I think it's a useful tool for everybody.
Okay.
And I'm happy to help facilitate that when the time is right.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll have like a draft version maybe and run it by the commission and the select board before it becomes a document on the website, maybe.
Yeah. It may be a tool that may also be adapted if the select board would like to use a similar tool but give certain weight to particular items. They may be able to adapt it for their own use and not have to replicate the research process that we're doing.
Thank you, guys. You're doing an awful lot of work. That's excellent. Yes, Tom.
I guess one more point I wanted to bring up is it's kind of a minor one, but the other examples that we found from other towns all tend to be like 7 or 10 pages, and they look like quite a real. I mean, it doesn't come close to the 250-page, you know, planning docs and such, but it looks like a pretty formidable document. But I think we all were under agreement that the to a point, the shorter and more concise, the better. If you actually look at some of those documents, they're giving a lot of background info and repeating what some other plans already say. So we just want it to be a very user-friendly and effective document. So
great.
That's what y'all can expect unless you want something different.
Effective and user-friendly sounds perfect. Thank you. Okay, so land use regulation amendments. Sue, do you want to walk us through that?
And I'm just going to bid you farewell. Thank you all. I wanted to stick through the solar sighting.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. Take care.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye-bye.
All right, so what we're hoping to do tonight is to kind of finalize some of the zoning amendments that we've been looking at over the year so that we can begin the public hearing process. At the last meeting, we had talked about the need to, if we were going to make changes to the flood hazard overlay district to remain eligible for the class 8 in the CRS, we're going to need to make those changes by June. And as a reminder, the level 8 that we're currently at means that all flood insurance policyholders in Brattleboro get a 10% discount. And if you've read anything about what's happening with flood insurance policies over the years, basically they've moved from a kind of heavily subsidized program to kind of actualized rates. And so they have increased a lot. So 10% is not anything to, you know, it can mean a lot to homeowners. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily have the information that we were hoping to be able to obtain about the number of policyholders and the amount that people are paying, because FEMA pretty much closely guards that, and Brian has asked for the information, but we haven't received it yet. And it comes to, we have to have some sort of agreement on how we would use that information. So what's before you basically is a whole bunch of zoning amendments that we would need to get jump started on. The adoption process takes a couple of months because it requires both planning commission hearings and 2 select board hearings. So what I was hoping to do tonight is finalize those amendments so that we could hold a public hearing at the April meeting and then pass them along to the select board. It is all, you know, the timeline is based on that. If we want to recommend the changes to the flood hazard ordinance, you know, this is when we should kind of set that deadline. And so you know, we can go through them. We can start with the flood hazard overlay. I know I put them out in bits and pieces. So I was trying to put it out in a way that was kind of easy to go through for you. I'm not sure if I managed to do that, but there's lots of little amendments to different pieces of the land use regulations. So I'm happy to start where you'd like to start.
Can you start where you think there's going to be the most discussion while we still have some energy and leave behind the ones that we think are going to be pretty easy to decide on?
Sure. Well, let's start with the flood hazard regulations, because those are the ones that you asked us to do outreach to Tri-Park with. Because this is the one where basically, sorry, I'll just grab my information. So right now in our regulations, we allow mobile homes to be either elevated 1 foot above base flood elevation or 4 feet above the ground level. And in particularly in Mountain Home Park, the base flood elevation can be like 7 to 9 feet above the ground level. And so the change that's proposed to remain in a level 8 is that you would not be able to be building 4 feet above ground. You would have to be 2 feet above base flood elevation. So that is a substantial change. We had a conversation with the manager of Tri-Park. We did share information about this meeting so that he can share it with his board members and anybody else in the park that he wanted to, so that they knew this conversation was going on tonight. He wasn't thrilled about it, particularly because they do have several empty sites in the park that are in the special flood hazard area. And they recently invested in trying to have a standard design for what 4 feet above ground level would look like and how you could place a home on that, in the hopes that as sites became available, they could at least hand that to the person that was interested in putting a home there. So, you know, that was not good news to the manager. At the same time, the cost of flood insurance and even financing in a flood hazard area is a substantial barrier, and it could be part of the reason why they have not been able to occupy those sites. So, you know, it's a real balance. There's a lot of low income people that live in the park. And there's a risk. There is a real risk of flooding there and damage to their homes. So do we go with a higher standard because that could have benefits on flood insurance, and it's also could be safer? Or, you know, it's a real challenging, I think, determination to make. We talked a little bit at the last meeting. So this would only go into effect if it's a vacant site and somebody wants to put a home there, that it would need to be 2 feet above base flood elevation. It also would go into effect if somebody was doing either had substantial damage, which is more than 50% of the value of the home, or they were making substantial improvements, which is more than 50% of the value of the home. Some of these homes that are particularly in the floodway, well, those, I shouldn't mention the floodway, because if those are damaged, they cannot go back there. The floodway is where there's a highest chance of flooding. So if those are substantially damaged, then you can't put another home on that site. And that's what happened post Irene. So there was about 22, well, not 22, it was less than that, but they've lost a lot of homes in the park, in the floodway. In the floodplain, there has been a loss of some homes because they were substantially damaged, and those homeowners couldn't necessarily bring them into compliance with the regulations. It's definitely the conundrum of, it's kind of an environmental justice, social justice issue, I think, with housing in the floodplains. So I think, the options are, we could put this to public hearing, or you could request more information from us. We could finalize these amendments for the purpose of public hearing. There's still options to pull it out, or if you need more information to kind of figure out if this is, if you even want to put it towards a public hearing, I think that's an option too.
Discussion?
So I'm curious, what are the implications if there is a flood and folks are displaced? And they don't have flood insurance? Does the town provide any security or safety for them? Is it all through FEMA? Like, what happens?
So the town doesn't. So if they are lose their home due to a flood, whether it's been substantially damaged, and they don't have insurance, the town does not have funding to help out in that way. I think what happened with Irene is several of the people made other arrangements. I don't know if they ended up staying in town. After Irene, there was a lot of assistance coming from the state, and I think Subcommittee was helping relocate people at that time. The town is currently involved in a master planning process to try to relocate homes from the floodplain. But that's a longer term project. I mean, we're trying to move it along as fast as we can. There's a lot of state support, both from the Agency of Natural Resources and Commerce and Community Development, to see the housing relocated. So we're trying to get out in front of that. FEMA does do buyouts. We tried after Irene to have them buy out some of the Glen Park properties and possibly some on Brook Street. It's a little bit funny because the park owns the land, so it's not a great fit. The FEMA and Vermont Emergency Management folks they expressed interest in looking into a buyout, but it's not a clear there's not a clear path to do it. And post Irene, the park wasn't really interested in giving up that land because the Tri-Park wouldn't own it anymore. If it's a FEMA buyout, the town then owns the land. And at that point, they weren't ready to lose lot revenue. So there isn't a quick and easy solution.
Prudence.
My thought is to have the 2-foot requirement, the one that is necessary for the discount for flood insurance, and these aren't good places for folks to live because they're not safe places. And so I guess, but we may, as you said, Sue, there's the opportunity during the public hearing that we could alter that. But I think if we would, I think we should start maybe with that language, and yeah, I do, for those reasons.
Anybody else? Yeah, Tom.
Have we already mentioned like a estimate of how many parcels this would affect? Changing 1 foot to 2 foot?
Well, the bigger impact is not the 1 foot to 2 foot. I mean, I could put up a map of the floodplain. I think I do have. I might have to find it in my files. The bigger piece for the mobile homes is that it would have to be, is that the base flood elevation is so much higher than the ground level. Maybe
it's not really 1 feet or 2 feet. You're talking 9 feet, right?
Yes.
Oh.
So the house has to be 9 feet higher than it was before.
Yes. Yeah, because the base flood elevation might be the ground level might be 7 feet below base flood elevation.
Right.
I want to say within the park, it's probably between 40 and 70 mobile home parks. They're not all that low, but it would probably affect, between 40, and 70 units. I can get that number.
40 and 70 units that are 9 feet below where they need to be.
No, not 9 feet, but this would apply to if these parcels were redeveloped, that they would need to be elevated higher than.
Because if you have to go 2 feet above base level flood elevation, and base level flood elevation is already 7 feet above the ground level, you have to go 9 feet up in the air.
Yeah. It's not that many units that would need to be 9 feet above.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely not that many units. I would have to get that. I'm happy to email it to you. I probably need Brian's assistant. He's done some mapping, and I have some in the Tri-Park.
But we've already been operating under this rule, but for 1 foot over base foot elevation, right? So we're just bumping it up 1 more foot.
No, because in the mobile home park, you could be 1 foot above base flood elevation, or you could be 4 foot above ground level. In the mobile home park, we would no longer have the 4 foot above ground level.
Oh, okay.
Automatically have to be 2 feet above.
I see that part removed. Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like Prudence has given us a way forward. Do we want to move with Prudence's way forward, or do we want to debate more? Jessica, are you, or what? I don't understand your gesture.
I'm just pointing at other people. Don't mind me.
You're pointing at Andrew though. Where I see you're pointing at Andrew, who's only Andrew now because Andrew just undarked himself. Dan, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so in the edits that Andrew and Sue have made, one of them, well, both I'm looking at are referring to FEMA standards and IBC standards. So essentially we would be just falling in line with the best practices in the field. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So I would assume that, again, since a lot of communities are probably dealing with this too, but we might, if we didn't do something about this, then we might be out of step with other places. I would think. Is that correct? Or maybe I'm not
I'm
right
not
about that.
sure about that. I think there's only one other community in Vermont that is in that level 8 for the community rating system that affords that discount. I think if we were to drop down a level, which is actually a level 9, that's the way it goes. So, I think the discount is 5%. So I'm not sure, designing something in accordance with the IBC, which is the International Building Code, or FEMA standards, that is, with us adding that in there, we're just clarifying that's kind of the standards that they're all designing it to anyway. Like you said, that's kind of the normal practice. But yeah, as to everybody else doing it, I'm not really sure. I think that Vermont DEC does recommend the 2 foot above base flood elevations. But I'd have to look at what other towns have done.
So, and a follow-up to that, is there an alternative for the property owners to do some backfilling where they can actually raise the ground level? And I don't know if that really affects the flood maps and so forth, but at least make it not so expensive to erect, let's say, a 9-foot pier or something like that.
Yeah, I do believe that we do allow fill. You can raise the elevation with fill for the structure. I think in the mobile home park, that's a bit of a challenge because they're really small lots. So I don't think that's feasible there. But if you're talking about a commercial or a single family residence elsewhere, not in a park, then yes, that is possible. I think the best case scenario for something like Tri-Park would be to kind of fully elevate it and have it as parking underneath with a house above, which is a different typology than what currently exists in the park now. But I think that's the direction it would have to go.
And would we be able to get funding, say $100,000 to put some parking there?
No,
we
it's not in the downtown. I mean, it would depend on the funding source. I can't think of one off the top of my head. We don't own the land, so that would be up to Tri-Park.
So again, should we move this to the public process, or shall we suspend it here? Commissioners?
Are you asking for a motion?
No, I think we should go through these things and vote them as a slate rather than vote every single one. That would be my preference, because I think we should pass them all. I mean, if we decide that we're going to pass this, then we should go forward. If we're not going to pass this, then there's no urgency on the other ones. This is the one that really has the time frame, and so we're using this to carry forward our other ones. But if we're not going to pass this, then there's less urgency on the other ones, is my understanding. Is that right too?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess it's just a sort of more of a kind of vote to move forward with the language as it's currently articulated, acknowledging this problem and hoping that some creative individual from the public will bring forward a solution through the public process.
And just to help you out, because I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm not sure how many of you have been through the bylaw adoption process, if any of you have. So there is a planning commission public hearing. After that, you would vote to send it on to the select board. So you could pull out pieces. We could get lots of feedback at the public hearing, and then you wouldn't want to move it forward. The select board you might take this one out and say this isn't going to work, or we're going to continue to work on getting you information and hard numbers to help with the decision making. And then the select board has 2 public hearings, at which case they can pull things out and choose not to adopt them, or send it back to the planning commission and say it needs more work. So sending it to a public hearing doesn't mean it's a finalized done deal.
Jessica.
I think moving this to the public hearing process is really important and would be really helpful. If the public hearing process is accessible, and maybe we make a really specific effort to not just engage folks in one of these normal meeting things, but try some alternative means of getting the information that we need and getting the feedback that we need to make a good decision. And I wonder if, a directed mailing to the most impacted folks, or, that sort of outreach might help them understand this a little better. And then maybe there is a mechanism like specific questions or a survey, or something that they can send back that's really simple, that helps us understand, is this going to impact you? Do you have flood insurance? Do you have an exit plan in case there's another flood? Like what's going to help us make that decision to finally pass this along to the select board? And I think it's important that we make it a really accessible process.
It also seems so that if it is possible for us to get the stuff about who's getting the 10%.
Yep.
Because I don't know, I feel like a socialist here, but it seems to me that if we're giving a break to people who are in the upper echelons of the income bracket at disadvantaging the people at the bottom, that I am opposed to doing that.
Yeah, I
and
understand. I think we're more likely to get an idea of how many residential policies there are and how many commercial properties they are. I don't think we're going to find out who are the policy holders. But I think just his suggestion, in fact, I know I had a conversation with Brian last week. He needs to do a regular mailing to those in the floodplains. So this is really good timing to do the survey. I mean, if people want to tell us that, that's great, and we'll have that information. I just don't know that we'll get that level of detail from FEMA.
Yeah. Okay,
but
so
if they could tell us, if it's a mobile home, if it's a multifamily home, is it a single family home, that would be helpful.
So is everybody in agreement essentially to move this into the public stream and then retract it at some later date if we discover that we made a mistake? Dan, you look as if you're.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What's the time frame for this that this needs to be decided by?
So what I would hope is that we would hold the public hearing at the April meeting. And so we'll have to warn public hearing mid-March. So we'll be moving on it to collect that information for the public hearing.
So there's a groovy little schema in the memo, Dan, that shows the timing of this process if we approve these things tonight. Did everybody see the groovy little schema that Andrew made?
Very groovy.
Okay.
I did see that. Thank you. I remember now. Yeah, great.
Good. So all right, are we going to go on to the next one?
Sure. Let's go on to the part 2 amendments because these are really quick to get through. I can share my screen. These amendments are primarily those that will make the interim bylaw that the select board passed in September permanent. So it was doing away with residential densities, and it was, I'm just bringing it up now. Gets late, I can't multitask as well. So you'll see the red strikeout in the village center district. We no longer have residential densities that we're requiring in the more dense parts of town. So the service center. And there's a couple other minor changes to the service center that I want to go through. Back in, I think, maybe 2017, we had talked about not allowing surface parking or parking structures as standalone uses in the service center district. And the service center is basically kind of the big box retail that we have on Putney Road. And then it goes north of the roundabout on the west side of the road. So where some of the auto dealerships are, where Great River Terraces, the hotels, those are all up in the service center as well. And the thought there was that, we just didn't want more impervious, like large expanse impervious spaces of just having parking. Parking associated with the use was okay, but parking as a standalone use wasn't desirable. And we do have there is a commuter lot up north of the roundabout anyway. So those were two changes to the service center.
Sue, were there any proposals
No,
related to that?
no,
you
there
said?
were not.
Yeah.
No. And we had decided to take it out of permitted uses. If you guys disagree and would like it to be in conditional use, we can make that change too. But no, we haven't had proposals. In the neighborhood center, in addition to getting rid of the residential density, it's just a cleanup because, at some point our draft talked about having a neighborhood center. Oh, wait a minute. I made a mistake there.
Yeah.
I meant to make this change to the service center.
Right.
If you see the service center, I did it on the wrong one. I apologize. It says that there's a service center on exit 1 near Canal Street. That's not right. So this change that I made to neighborhood center should actually be made to the description in the service center. I'm sorry for the confusion. This neighborhood center plan description should remain the same.
Okay.
In the mixed use neighborhood, we felt that 4,000 square feet as a footprint size was too small. So the planning commission had decided to increase it to 6,000 square feet. And then again, getting rid of the residential density. This is the residential neighborhood. So again, getting rid of the density. And then these were also changes that we had made, the permitted uses, making 3-unit, 4-unit, and 5 units in an existing structure, making them permitted uses. And then if it was 5 units or more in new construction, that could be a conditional use. So that was all part of the interim bylaw as well. And then there had been a previous discussion about adding rooming or boarding houses as a conditional use in the residential neighborhood. And then rural business, this is also part of the interim bylaw. Same with the institutional zoning district. So these are the proposed changes to the rest of part 2. Is there any questions or
Yeah,
comments
I would love to see the parking structure as a conditional use in the service center district. Particularly, I think on Putney Road, it might open up accessibility for that strip to be more bike and pedestrian friendly if there's a place to put cars long term. So I don't know.
Can you say what a little bit more what you're envisioning, Jessica? That turning one of the parking lots actually into a structure, so there would be levels of parking there that people could then park their cars and bike into town and hang out.
Yes, that is the vision. Or use the service center area as a pedestrian or bicyclist.
Okay.
Rather than, stopping at Hannaford's, then going up to Agway, then going over to the bowling alley, and then, driving all of those places.
I see.
If there was a dedicated parking structure, that might encourage other modes of transportation in the area.
Is there safe sidewalks on that area? My experience of seeing people walking there is, in fact, it's really not safe to walk there.
There are some stretches, and there's a bike lane.
There are some stretches. There is a bike lane, and there is a Vermont Agency of Transportation project that would have bike lanes, roundabouts, crosswalks, and sidewalks, or multi-use path in certain areas. So that is about a 2025 construction project, if all goes as planned. It's in preliminary design phase right now.
Would a parking structure, Sue, impact our goals with limiting impervious surfaces from that area?
I think it could help. Yeah, I think it would.
So conditional?
Is that an easy fix, Sue?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Are we good?
I have a question.
Tom? Yeah.
In the residential neighborhood, I like how rooming and boarding house was added. It wasn't there currently. And depending on, I don't know, I guess how you define rooming or boarding house, I know of a few already that exist in the residential neighborhood zones or zone. To me, it's not too much different than all sorts of other rentals that are already happening there. I wonder why there's maybe why it has been included, and why maybe there's some trepidation at just putting it in the permitted category.
That's a.
Is there something that tends to go along with rooming and boarding houses that's tends to correlate with it, or something that doesn't correlate with 6 single bedroom unit rentals in a house?
Yeah, no, I would say no. And I think, I don't know if it came along, I can't really recall why the Planning Commission had made that decision at the time. I think, the housing situation in Brattleboro wasn't as well understood. So I don't see any barrier to making it a permitted use at that time. I mean, group homes, one of the other changes that you will see is to group homes, and those are permitted uses in anywhere that you can have a home. So I think there's not a problem making it permitted.
Okay.
Bless you, Jess. Are we good? Okay. Keep us moving there, Sue.
All right. Let's see. Not too far out.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, get to see everything. Let's jump to 1, 4, and 5 amendments, because there are not too many of them, and it should be pretty quick. The Part 1 amendments are due to state statute changes, so they don't call it accepted agricultural practices anymore; they're required practices. And then this was the group home I was just talking about here. It can no longer, they're just permitted. You used to have some conditions where if they were located within 1,000 feet of each other, then you could treat it as a conditional use or something, or you could prohibit it. It's by right. So those both, again, are quick and easy statute changes that we're just bringing the regs up to date with. Part 4, we
Can you make it a little bit larger? It's hard to read.
Sure. Is that better?
Is that okay, Gary?
Sorry, I don't see the chat.
Awesome. Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah.
So site plan criteria, it had been recommended that we include the energy conservation criteria in site plan. So previously it was just in conditional use, but energy, because conservation is important to the town. So this would make it part of the site plan review criteria as well. And then the last one is to add a different definition of livestock. I think we had a case where, somebody was saying that what we considered livestock was a domesticated pet. So we gave we allowed it, and then we started getting complaints about, the waste and how often they were outside and the noise and the smell and stuff. So we just want to clarify what livestock is, so that, anything that is not a dog or cat is basically would require conditional use before you could have it in a residential neighborhood. If you are in the rural parts of town, you're allowed to have livestock without permits. This has to do with the residential neighborhoods because it's dense development.
What about chickens? Asks Gary.
So chickens are permitted. You do need a permit for it. You cannot have roosters in the residential neighborhood. And then there's some other requirements like you have to, I think the chicken coop has to be 50 feet from any neighboring structures, and you have to manage the waste. So we do issue quite a few chicken permits. We get a lot more inquiries than actual permits are issued. And they're not supposed to be free roaming in the residential neighborhood. They're supposed to be, have room on the property.
Gary says there are a few on Canal Street. Dan, is that your hand up? Oh, okay. All righty. I remember the camelids. That was a long time ago.
Is it that long time ago?
It seems like a long time. Well, we were in the same room, so that feels like a long time ago. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, I actually done a little research and thinking, and I feel like I like the livestock one to clarify, but I'm leaning towards preferring some sort of exception or clarification around the pigs actually. I've found some other towns and cities zoning or ordinances that makes exceptions for I see your comment, Gary. I think that pig may not have been a certain breed that stays under a certain size, but other so some zoning and ordinance that I've come across of other places has said that as long as it's under a certain weight, and with certain conditions and maybe certain recognized pet breeds like the potbelly and the Juliana breeds, it's been accepted in other places, and that pigs can be smarter than dogs and cats, and we're just as smart, and they can be trained and control their waste, and they don't bark, don't have sharp teeth, things like that. So I think it's a case of a situation of just something that's unconventional, just people kind of being scared of something that's unconventional, but we shouldn't just make such barriers to it, because my research has shown that that they can be just as successful as pets as any dog can be.
So are you suggesting that we amend this to exclude swine from the list?
Well, no, not swine, like broad brush, but and I don't have any wording right now. Well, I mean, I have some notes, but I don't. But I'm saying to make some sort of exception for I don't know, what are some things that some other zoning and ordinances said? They said like a veterinarian approved pet breed of pig. There was weight limits, like under 120 pounds maximum. Some dogs get bigger than that. It can't be used as livestock or for food or fiber. It shall be treated, like dogs. It shall be spayed and neutered and vaccinated. So, I don't think it's a very popular thing amongst the townspeople to get a pig over a dog, but just from the research I've found that they can be just as enjoyable and safe and fit into being a pet just as well, if not better, than a dog. Gary, I'm not sure if you'd be surprised is agreeing with that or disagreeing, but feel free to chime in.
I guess so. Are you just commenting, Tom, or do you want to, or do you?
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah,
Gary, give us some language so that we can,
sure.
because yes, Gary,
Okay.
go ahead. Did
Well,
you?
yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Well, from what I seen, like even in the areas, even back then, there was a gentleman on Clark Street that had a pig. I don't know if you all remember. And I have a lot of livestock, as I noticed. It was a chicken coop next to where the food works is the next house up. So people are now bringing it, even on when you go down William Street, people are raising. And I think I'm just thinking, because that's something that can be added to the amendment with the exception of and with the laws of that, considering that so people know what is acceptable.
I think, I'm just trying to. So we're very clear about chickens. And basically what we say is on other livestock or wild animal is that it's prohibited unless we're approved by the DRB as conditional use. This provision shall not apply to cats, dogs, or other small domestic animals generally considered household pets, provided that such animals are contained on the subject property and do not pose a hazard or nuisance. The situation that we ran into was that we did permit it as a domestic. It was a pig. It was permitted as a domestic. And then we got lots of complaints about odor. And that, they did have a vet's letter saying that, they're domesticated, they're in the house, they're outside of the house, but, it became a nuisance because it wasn't being managed properly. The waste wasn't being managed properly. So, we were just hoping to, going to the DRB can be a little bit of a hassle and take some time, but it also was kind of protecting everybody around them too, and letting them know that it was going on and giving them a voice. And so that was our idea with the pig. I don't think, I don't disagree that they can be good pets. And, there have been others in town where it wasn't a problem. It's just when it initially came for a permit, the zoning administrator said, well, we don't have a really clear definition, and I have a vet's letter saying it's domestic, so I'll go with that. Now, it could just be a case of, one unfortunate situation.
Yeah, because I noticed that even with housing, some person that's moved up from Mass had a chicken. It was rather difficult finding housing until they finally got something and they bought some property and land and put it on themselves. But I don't know if that's a language with something, even with the Humane Society, what they deem livestock or what's acceptable for having in one's home as domesticated. So that I guess something like that, I don't know, maybe taking up and see what Kathy Barrows, what they think about that as well too. Along with, like you said, with the town, what they deem acceptable, because I've noticed a lot of people coming up. I mean, you could have a ferret, you could have whatever, things like that. So it's just trying to get clarification. Some people moving in don't know if they're allowed to have certain pets in certain dwelling places along also on their land. I know definitely chickens are acceptable, but if they're coming up here or moving in or people who already have, and if they're capable and able to have that in their dwelling place, and that's not going to cause a hazard or anything like that to another person or anything, and that's going to be detrimental, something that I don't know, that can be somehow put into the amendment. So it's more clarification for some who may not, say, wow, well, what can I have? What is acceptable, and they don't have that stature. So it's just a thought.
So I guess I'm not clear on what we're doing at this point. Do we want to amend this little section that just essentially defines what livestock are, and which is none of these would be considered to be domestic pets, and do we want to add a line that says this excludes certain breeds of these kinds of animals which are commonly recognized as domestic pets, provided the owner cares for them as would be expected of domestic pet? Or do you want to just leave it as is and go through the public process and change it there?
The first would be my preference, but maybe we should work on the wording a little bit.
Okay. Sue, can we do that and still meet our deadline?
Not really. Because you won't, I mean, the idea would be to take these to public hearing. But what I would say is, at some point there's going to be other amendments. So we could just not amend this section. We could continue to operate it on the zoning administrator's judgment and bring this in the next round.
Tom, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. As long, maybe we could talk and figure out some wording we're happy with right now, but maybe we should just put it off.
Well, how about the sentence that I just said? Except for some of these characters, creatures, what's the technical term? Animals?
Breeds? Oh, yeah.
Breeds. So, except for certain breeds who are among these who are commonly recognized as domestic pets. And that, I think that covers like the potbelly, but it's not, you're not gonna, no cows are gonna come under that rubric.
Right. Yeah, and then maybe add as long as they're treated like pets.
As long as they're, treated and cared for as domestic pets.
Right.
Is that okay, Sue?
Yes. I think I would prefer that to be in 301 point C, which talks about animals, rather than be in this definition of livestock. I
Okay,
think it would work better under other livestock and wild animals, adding the sentence there that I can't remember. Which breeds did you say, Tom? It was the potbellied and what was the other one?
Yeah, well, those are some examples. I found that the potbelly, whether it's called Vietnamese or Asian potbelly, is one, and then there's another, the Juliana.
Okay.
There were some others, but they seem much rarer. But some wording I found was, it listed those two, and then it also said, or any veterinarian approved domestic breed. So I guess you'd need to get a letter from a veterinarian or someone.
I think that's reasonable, though. I mean, that's what happened in this case. They were easily able to get it from their vet.
Great. Yeah, and any nuisance can be covered in the same way that it's covered for dogs or other pets.
Yeah.
Which and then that's not here in our zoning. That's in whatever town ordinance or state law.
Okay, so if you're all okay with me making that change to 301.c, I'll add that language, and you'll see it at public hearing. Can change it if it's not quite right.
ready, okay, thumbs up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in one of the ordinances, I think. Dog wolf hybrids.
Okay, how are we doing, Sue?
We're doing good. Let's see. So that's 1, 4, and 5. Let's go to part 3. We made a change. Sorry, this is in gray. But to sheds, we had agreed that workshops, artist studios, and other one-story detached accessory structures not used for human habitation, a maximum of 200 square feet footprint could be within 5 feet of the rear or side setback. So that was a decision we made to, oh, it turned red now. Not sure why that happened. This is the changes to the single room occupancy that had been agreed on.
Yep. Jess.
I just had a question in I guess it's not something that we even talked about, but the letter K, which got changed to letter J at the bottom of your screen, Sue.
Yep.
A unit must be at least 200 square feet. So that's a room in.
Yes.
Okay. I think I might have actually mentioned this before, but that seems a little bit large. Especially for our older buildings in town.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to make a change to that?
Yes.
Do you have a recommendation for how big or how small?
Um, I'm I don't.
150.
Tom, do you have thoughts on this?
I just threw out a number, 150. But yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree with you, and that's a good catch. You know, assuming that the single unit, especially, you know, let's say it doesn't have the kitchen because it shares it with others, it doesn't have a bathroom because it shares it with others, then this might just be a bedroom. And none of the bedrooms in my house are that large. You know, some of them are
Yeah.
quite a bit smaller. I mean, my house isn't a single residency. You know, I should clarify that for all the public watching. But not that it's a problem if it was, but I think I'd have to get a permit for that. But yeah,
150, yeah,
I don't know.
sounds like a good number.
I'd say, yeah, even maybe 120 could be,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I'd say a bedroom that's 120 is fine, but maybe an SRO unit that's 120 might be a little small, but I can get behind 150.
For sure.
Prudence, did you
Yeah,
want to say something?
I'm comfortable with 150.
Dan, did you want to say something? I saw your hand up earlier.
Well, it was a different comment, but actually I think I would go closer to 120 or 125, just as if it's a real hard number, at least. For the
'Cause
SRO.
all these weird shaped rooms in old houses with the little cutouts and the chimney spaces
And the eave space and so forth, yeah.
So can we compromise on 130?
that sounds good.
Sure.
I'm good with that.
Okay, great.
Thanks, guys.
All right, onward.
This is the inn, and this is what we're getting rid of is guest parking must not be located between the building and the street. This was a little, it was not necessary. Each of the zoning districts have requirements of where parking can be located. And if this is in the rural or the rural residential part of town, parking can be within the front, you know, between the building and the street, and this seems not necessary. So we'll just let the zoning district dictate that. This is the fun one. I love this one. We right now require so much parking for a mini storage. The self-storage is 1 per 600 square feet of gross floor area. This was just one of those where you find it when it happens. Somebody was doing a title search on a property and was like, this would really require like 40 parking spaces. And oh no, this. So now we're saying 4 spaces plus 2 for managers' quarters if they exist. Because there's so much pavement around the mini storage anyway, you usually just pull up to your lot or your unit.
Good.
Okay, this is kind of a big one. This is a change right now. If a property is repaving, they don't require a permit. And so this would be for commercial properties such as Hannaford's or Price Chopper, both who have repaved in the past several years. This would require them to get a permit, and it's an opportunity to bring it better into compliance with the regulations, which require some landscaping and you know, maybe narrowing drive aisles or whatever it might be. So it would require a permit.
That sounds like a good idea.
This one will take education to get compliance, but yeah, for sure, it's.
Yeah, is this done many other places though?
It is done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So on maintenance of the parking lot, a permit's required.
It's resurfacing. If it's
Okay.
resurfacing, yeah. Restriping as well, because we don't want them to create more parking. You know, if they're going to be restriping it with changes, then we want them to come in because we want them to stay in compliance with the regulations. So Section 316, this was one where we have a prohibition that retaining walls can't be greater than 16 feet in height. And this is recognition that in the industrial district, there is some steep land that requires retaining walls in order to be developed. So we got rid of it in the industrial zoning district.
And quick question, is the reason for having or the thought process originally, well, in all the other zones, retaining walls can't be over 16 feet. Is the rationale, what's the rationale for that? Safety or aesthetics or?
Oh boy.
Because presumably there's some other lots that are hard to develop in other zones.
There could be, yeah. I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was probably more aesthetics, in that we'd prefer terraced walls where then maybe you could landscape in between. So that's kind of the idea, but we could open it up to higher retaining walls all around.
Well, yeah, I don't know, just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was definitely like respecting the shape of the landscape.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah. The stormwater management, this is another big one that you should be aware of. So we have some exemptions to meeting bringing a property into compliance with the stormwater regulations. So if you're not increasing impervious surfaces, depends on the lot size, but it's by more than 500 square feet in some situations or 1,000 square feet in others, then you don't need to come into compliance with the stormwater regulations. This one, so many opportunities to improve the stormwater management of sites have, kind of slipped through our fingers because of this exemption. In our minds, if you are redeveloping the lot, then you should bring it into compliance. We have really old stormwater systems on sites, and some of them aren't functioning well, but we don't have a way to improve them with this exemption. I can think of a property on Putney Road where they resurfaced and totally rehabbed a building, and because they weren't adding any impervious surface, didn't have to fix the stormwater issues. And they're all designed in a way, the older development is designed in a way to get it off the site as quickly as possible, and then it gets into the town stormwater system. And so there's costs that everybody bears with that. What we try to do with the regulations is to get them to have some of it infiltrate on site. And so don't just dump it into the town system, manage it where you can on your property. And then, there's an opportunity to use the town stormwater system. But first you should be using better practices and keeping it on site, and preferably not using structural systems too. There's a lot that green infrastructure can handle. So this is a big one, but it had been decided maybe 2017, 2018 by Planning Commission. Are there questions on this one?
Looks like Dan.
Quick question. It actually gets to the previous section where it said regrading would be part of the requirement for to trigger a permit. Regrading would of course mean slopes are changing and so forth. So is there a limit of regrading that would then have an impact on the maybe an angle or a degree of difference that because I'm assuming that this exemption was in there, as you just said, for probably convenience in many ways, but without replacing that exemption with anything, is that what we're planning to do? We're just cutting it out.
We're cutting it out. So if you are, if you're into major site plan review, then you would need to come into compliance with stormwater. If you're just regrading a parking lot, it's just a smaller project. That's not going to trigger major site plan review.
Mhm.
But if you are in major site plan review because you've got a large project, then you're going to have to come into compliance.
Mhm. Right. Great,
So,
thanks.
This is the cottage cluster development. This is one of our planned unit developments. We just felt that we had so many design standards on there that it's really been a barrier to any use of it. We often have people kind of come in with these creative, how to put multiple units on a lot, and we want to point them towards this, but we're so specific in the design. Something like this would prevent a tiny house village, or there's a property in West Brattleboro Village that has a couple of tiny houses and some other kind of different forms of housing. So we'd like to get rid of the requirements of roofing and how high the building is and the pitch of the roof. These are all small homes that the cottage cluster envisions. So
Great.
make it easier. All right. I think we've got two.
I have a question, but on the first page of this, it's not about one of the changes. It's some wording that I always found it hard to understand. In the notes down below, note number 1 and 2, just it's about the wording with that. So let's say for porches, it says see note number 2, up to 8 feet beyond district setback. Does that mean into the district setback, or like interior into the property from the setback? What does beyond mean there?
It means towards the road. So if we're talking about the front setback and it's a 10-foot setback, you could actually go 8 feet into that, so that you are
Gotcha.
within 10 feet of the property line. I shouldn't say road, I should say property line.
All right. Seems like it took you a few seconds to
It
figure
did.
that out too. So I don't know, maybe it should be changed to actually say that. Like into, I think into is clearer, but at least that's from my layman's, jargon.
I think into is probably clearer.
Yeah. And then is all of those sentences structured like, well, hold on, up to 8 feet into district setback, encroachment into or over so is the second clause of the sentence, like, does it stand alone, or is it dependent on the first part? Like, is it
It stands alone.
okay?
It's not dependent.
All right, so maybe a period in between those would make
Sure.
sense to me. Okay.
Yep.
Same with note 1.
Yep.
All right. I was really scratching my head like some days ago, looking at those two.
Thanks
Okay.
for the good pickups. Let's go with the proposed changes to attached housing and campgrounds. Maybe the red will come up on this. So where we left that, it was pretty clear that in attached housing, we didn't want snout housing, which is where the garage is in front of the building. So let's see, number 2 and 3, we had talked about at the last meeting, and there didn't seem to be issues there. So where I settled was, because it's kind of consistent with other parts in the regulations, is that it should be located at or behind the building front line. And I know, Tom, you had some concerns about where the building front line is. If you have a porch, so building front line as defined in the regulations is basically where the outer wall of the house is. And Tom, I think, brought up that you could have a porch off of that, and therefore, why couldn't your garage, be there, with any
Well.
kind of accessory structure? That's not like the other parts of the regs are consistent with this, where garages are at or behind the building front line. So I struggled a little bit in how to kind of capture that sentiment. And because we allow porches and whatnot to be within that setback area. So.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that as written, but I think to support the sentiment even more, one of the pictures you showed the the front door recessed like beyond into the, or whatever you want to say, like recessed beyond the building front line. So I think to kind of capture this, preventing any
Mhm.
semblance of snout housing, the front door would also have to be at the building front line. So I'm kind of arguing for something that maybe seems against, what I was saying before. But do you see what I'm getting at though?
Yeah, I don't know that I agree. I mean, the building front line is the exterior wall of the house. So to me, if the garage, yes, I do see now that I go to say it out loud.
Yeah, because there was one of the images you showed where all of the second floor was at the building front line. The garage's doors were at the building front line, and maybe like a first floor window was at the building front line, but each front door was recessed.
Yeah.
So it didn't have a porch, sticking out per se, but it kind of made a porch by the recessing into the building, and it wasn't snout housing per se, but it was the human scale front door was minimized, which is what we don't want, right?
Right.
Well, except for well, I actually don't know if you would save money building this way, but I mean, if you didn't want snow on your porch, you would recess it a little bit so you could step into this cubby.
Right.
Before you opened your door.
Which was going to be my point, and then I realized, kind of what you were saying.
I mean, I guess and I don't know that it would be that building that way is less expensive than building a porch with a roof over it. Yeah. Because it is kind of a drag to have all the snow land right in front of your front door.
Yep.
So the definition of building front line is a line extending parallel from the exterior front wall of a building.
Maybe it could be added to that behind the building front line or front door, whichever is whichever is my brain just stopped.
Right, whichever is
more forward, no, more
yeah.
more
I think
backward.
we're trying to go, whichever is closest.
More visible from the street.
Maybe closest to property line. I'll word that a little bit. I'll figure out the right wording of that, but basically whichever is closest to the property line is somewhere. Okay.
How are we doing, Joe?
All right, we have campground and signs, so we're almost there. Can you all hang in?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Campground, this is what we had decided at one of the other meetings, so.
That's good.
Oh, there's no change to number 1.
Oh, did we change number 1? And I missed it?
Well, I know what my
Definitely
preference
discussed
was,
it.
but I don't remember what the vote
I
was.
thought we went around and around and around and we decided to leave it because now I can't remember what the logic was, but I remember we decided to leave it because it might get exploited for substandard housing.
Or the danger of camping in the off-season cold weather.
And this
I think that came up and got refuted as well. So.
Assumption that we wanted to just strike the whole thing out.
That's what I remember too, that we were going to take number 1 out because as long as there was, as long as the sewer and water and so on met state regulations, it was okay for
That's
them
right.
to be occupied longer.
Reading the minutes from January 4th.
Clever.
Most commissioners agreed to allow full-time to stay at campground for the whole year. That's not to say that, we're not a different commission now, but that's what we
vote on it.
We in fact are, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. So we're gonna strike it for public hearing purposes?
Yep,
Yes.
away.
Okay. Great. Thank you for catching that. Sorry, I missed it. Okay, the last part is signs.
Yay!
And
So
yeah, Justin,
excited.
you will remember it. I'm not sure how many of you it
This was from a long, long time ago.
was. It was probably when you were first on.
Yes, yeah.
Yep. October 2018. It was my first meeting. too.
Oh, okay, good. So several
Wow.
of you were here for it. We made some changes to the exemption signs to comply with a Supreme Court ruling. And so not being specific about what the sign says, but trying to more be specific about size of temporary signs. So we didn't differentiate between political signs and garage sale and all that. Then the mixed use, we moved into sign zone 1. And the reason being is that sign zone 1 is for a more walkable pedestrian scale. Having it with the waterfront and institutional districts allowed for larger scale signs. And the mixed use is kind of areas along Canal Street. There's one on Frost Street and I think Burr Street. So more walkable neighborhoods, so a little bit smaller signs and not as high. And then we had the blade signs, which you may remember.
Yeah.
Hopefully you had a chance to read it. You know, we showed blade signs, but our regulations weren't fitting in. Those are the long signs like Insight, not Insight. Yes, Insight has one that they work really great when you're looking down the alleys in Main Street. So this was language that we had approved. And then last but not least,
The most
is-
elegant. I
Yeah.
love this.
Yes, was the some of these deletions were because we were treating different signs differently and we're under the Supreme Court case, Gilbert versus Arizona, we shouldn't be. And then distinctive signs. We spent a lot of time working on this. So this was kind of that allowing a really creative sign that we all really like, but don't fit within the regulations. This was a way to allow the DRB to review these signs and have a public hearing and be able to approve signs. So this was something specifically that the DRB had been asking for.
Great. Yeah, Tom.
Is temporary defines, sorry, is the time limit of temporary signs defined somewhere? Just curious. What makes it temporary?
So look that up to see if we define it.
The recent feedback I got from the town clerk's office was a temporary sign could be up for 2 weeks.
I think it really depends. So political signs can be up for 2 weeks. Let's see, you know, we were saying special events could be a week prior to the event, 24 hours afterwards. You know, garage sales, then you look at our temporary uses. So if somebody's constructing a subdivision and they wanted to put up a sign, it's going to be a longer period of time. So that is a good question and one that I can't really answer without doing some research.
I'm just curious. It doesn't change how I feel about these amendments.
Can I get back to you on that?
Sure.
It looks like in defining signs in that new rule, all of the different classifications of temporary signs had to be struck in this document.
Okay.
So it doesn't look like there is a time definition on temporary signs. So good catch, Tom.
And we can do that. I'm wondering for that one, if I do a little research, we could always have the public hearing. We could enter that as kind of testimony and you could make a decision at that point. How you wanted to move it forward with the select board, because that'll give me a chance to talk to Brian and see what his interpretation or how he would interpret this.
That sounds good. Are you okay with that, Tom?
Yep, sounds
Okay.
good.
So that's what we have for these amendments.
So do we want to, does somebody want to make a motion to pass them on to the public process as a slate?
Oh my gosh, I want to move that. It's so exciting. I feel like I've been working on some of these since I joined the planning commission. And it's like,
All yours,
yes,
Jessica.
yes.
I was wondering what happened to them. I didn't know the process.
Yeah. So I move that we forward these along to the public hearing process. That's not the right wording, but make me sound brilliant. Will ya?
No, that's perfect. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Great. Is there any discussion, further discussion, or should we go right to the vote? All those in favor of passing these on? Great.
Excellent.
Well done. Good work, you guys. Sue,
Yeah.
do we need to do anything else? Or are we done?
Well, I just want to say, because our last couple of planning commissioners resigned prior to having them in a meeting. So if this happens to be Jess's last planning commission meeting, I just want to thank you for the time on the planning commission and wish you good luck on your next endeavors. If this is not your last meeting, we'd be super excited to still have you on it.
Have this not
It's
be
not
your
my
last
meeting.
meeting,
Thank
Jess.
you for your gratitude, and I will be back to give you more
Great,
next month.
good.
Good luck, Jess.
Thanks,
Um,
guys.
Nothing
Is there a
else.
motion to adjourn.
Fuck, Jess. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second it.
All those in favor of adjourning? Say thumbs
Aye.
up. Yeah, stand adjourned.
Good night, Gary.
guys.
Good night, Gary.
Take care.
Good night. Stay
Everybody
warm.
vote.
Good night, everyone.
See ya.
Stay
Hey, everybody,
warm.
don't forget to vote.